Hi Chris, how are you?
Good afternoon, Rod. Yeah, I'm well. Here we are on the 22nd of March. It's episode 165. Let's get that out of the way before we dive into the show. I'm doing all right. A bit sad we got a little bit of rain after we've had a couple of glorious days here actually in the Cotswolds. How's the weather in Swansea?
Yeah, there was a bit of rain this morning, but actually it's turned out to be an okay day as the day's gone on. They can certainly see some sunshine in the windows behind me, so yeah, it's been alright.
Yeah, looks better with you than with me. It is warm here. It's just a bit grey, I guess. It's grey and a bit warm, so it's all right. It could be worse.
Could be worse. Should we dive in and do a show?
That could be a show title. But yes, let's get on and do the show.
Dive in into a show. I don't know.
No, I was thinking it could be worse. Could be the show title.
It could be worse, but I don't think that reflects the state of the world, so I don't want to go with that.
Well, I don't know. It could be worse. Should we get into follow-up?
Let's do some follow-up. And revisiting a story we had briefly last week. This was an article in Wired I saw this morning, actually, about how to avoid US-based digital services and why you might want to. I don't think anything that's happened in the last week has changed my opinion on that particularly. And this is just quite a long article, but going through absolutely everything that you might want to take into account when you think about why you might want to ditch some US services. And there are things like Nextcloud, and there are things like Proton Mail, and Proton VPNs, and all the rest of it that's in here. Netherlands-based things, WeGo, OpenStreetMap instead of Google Maps, all sorts of stuff like that. I think it's a long but worth the read, frankly.
Yeah, and it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to avoid American companies if you really want to. Do you think this will become more mainstream over time? That more people will want to avoid American companies?
Well, probably not Americans, but I think...
no, but I sort of mean in Europe and our parts of the world, will there be more of an active effort amongst, I'm going to say the general population, i.e. non-techie people?
I think there probably will be. I think we'll see a move from the EU to push towards more European-based services, if not more open-source type services as well. And, I talked last week about Nextcloud and how I'm running my own little Nextcloud hub now, and actually that's worked out quite well for me. I could always have done something with a bit of sort of SSH and VPNs and Tailscale to get back to my stuff in the house, but actually having something I can hit just on the internet through a tunnel to have access to my services to sync things, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more when we get to the main show as well, has proved to be quite a useful thing for me. And the fact that you can run Office apps on it, and you can run password encryption apps on it, and you can do video conferencing and all sorts of stuff, with a little bit of thought, you could run your business off something like that, replaces your, not everything. I mean, I think it takes a little more effort to get to an Amazon S3 or something like that you're going to run on-prem. It's weird how these things go around in circles, isn't it? But I feel there is definitely a pause now when you think about signing up for a new service or buying a new thing that is American. It's amazing how quickly the world has been affected by this.
I'd agree. I completely agree with you. And it's quite interesting, isn't it? We probably had an era where countries bought things within their own countries, and we've had an era of internationalization, and now it feels like we're dialing back from that. We've gone too far one way, and the world is dialing back a little bit maybe and wanting to source more internally. It's quite interesting.
It really is. And on one level you think, is this good for the world? We were quite close, but at the same time we were very dependent on one very big player, particularly in the UK, for a very long time. And I think, the top 7 tech companies in the world are American. And let's face it, this podcast is founded on our admiration for one of those tech companies. But at the same time, Europe has absolutely some of the best brains in the world to be able to create technologies of its own and web services of its own. And if you look at something like, I don't know, pick one at random, Spotify, that's a world-defining service. All right, probably not the best one in the world, but has done incredibly well on a global scale, born in Europe. You don't have to have a big tech company come from America for it to be a good thing.
Agreed. And you're just going to have a dig at me for not trying Spotify.
I'm not, because I don't think Spotify pay their artists as well as they should. But at the same time, I think it swings and roundabouts, isn't it? I think once you get to a particular size, then you behave like the big capitalist pig in the room.
Yep, that is true. Sometimes I do wonder whether, do you think we'll ever go back from streaming services and go back to owning our music again?
Oh, it's not just music, is it? It's DVDs and things like that as well. I think there is something to be said, as we've repeatedly said in this podcast over the years, about owning your physical media.
Yep, owning those things you want to keep forever kind of thing.
Yeah. Turning on to another story, which absolutely echoes what we've just been saying about a move away from American services. The European Union is not blinking, is it, in terms of its sort of actions against both Apple and Google and other providers. But this particular story in Ars Technica is just highlighting what we said last week, that Apple is gonna be forced to open up iOS more, which they'll fight tooth and nail, and Google could face steep fines for its anti-competitive practices in terms of the App Store and things like that. The Google one's interesting because, unsurprisingly for Google, if you search for things, it pushes you towards their services. It pushes you towards Google Cloud, their Play Store, Google Docs, all that kind of stuff. And for Apple, they don't feel Apple have done enough to open up things like smartwatch platforms. So if you buy a new Pebble Watch, which will be available in December, you won't have the rich notifications and things like that you get an Apple Watch. And the European Union see that as unfair.
Yeah, I quite liked some of the stuff coming out of EU here. I do wonder whether we will get to benefit from it in the UK. But they were also talking about things like your AirPods. When you open your AirPods and you can instantly connect and sync between devices, Apple need to open that up. It'll be super interesting to see whether this A happens, and B, does Apple go, yep, it's the right thing, we're going to do it for everybody, which is not what they've done for the rest of the EU laws. And it's interesting the EU are going to declare that they do it. And I get to a point Apple develops some of these things for their own good, but I think it's right that they should be opening it up and giving everybody a fair chance.
Yeah, it's when you've got that sort of walled garden, it's keeping people out as well as keeping you in, isn't it? And that's very much what we see Apple doing. And hand on heart, it is anti-competitive. You buy the Apple Watch because it is the best first-party thing to have on the platform to get your notifications and et cetera with the iPhone. But why? The fact is, I saw Steve Troughton-Smith on Mastodon yesterday. He'd bought an Android watch because it had a circular face. And within about an hour, he had a circular face that he designed and built for the Apple Watch but could never get to work up and running on it. Now, that sort of openness, it's not just Google, but it should be any smartwatch that you buy. It could be a Garmin, it could be whatever. The APIs should be there in the system, that you buy the right bit of hardware that suits you, not that suits the vendor. I understand that the vendor wins from this, but I'm kind of sympathetic to the EU on this matter.
I think you and I are in the same boat, and I've walked away from Apple headphones because I don't want in-ear ones, and I want over-the-ear, and I want bone conduction ones, which Apple don't do. And actually, I really enjoyed them. My only one gripe is I have to disconnect them from one device to reconnect them to the other device, and this would solve that problem. And then they would work for me largely as well as my Apple devices, my Apple headphones. So I'm really looking forward to some of this stuff, and I'm glad that EU are doing this, and I hope then that other governments follow suit, and that we will get this in the UK, or we get it everywhere, or that the vendors go, it's the right thing, we will just do it, and they shouldn't need this regulation to make them do it.
It seems a shame that this is the only thing that does it, though. As we saw with USB-C, the only reason it really started rolling out to the iPhone was so they could still continue to sell iPhones and devices within the European Union as much as anything else, despite the fact Android and other devices and your headphones that you're wearing now and my headphones that I'm wearing now, which are much older than yours, have been USB-C forever. And that sort of push, even when they had them in their laptops, was extremely slow for Apple to turn around. So I think this is only a good thing that the EU is ordering this sort of opening up of the platform. I mean, there was a very interesting discussion on Upgrade this week between John Siracusa and Jason Snell about Apple, if they had a decent LLM on the iPhone, why were there no APIs available to other people to make use of? If you want to deploy an app to the iPhone, have you got to put it in with its own model and take up 200 gigs of hard disk space, SSD on your phone, and et cetera, and every app wants an LLM, they have to do that? Why wouldn't Apple, if they had the best, most security providing LLM on the device that would stay secure, open that up to developers? And they've never shown any sign of doing that.
That's because they haven't got the best one.
They haven't got anyone, really, have they?
Well, that's probably a better way of putting it. They've got now in that game, therefore they've got nothing to open up.
But all the same, at WWDC, all they said was, here's a couple of LLM-based things that we're going to put out there, all three of which have been terrible, let's face it. They're well behind on it. They've got some hardware that supports it nominally now. But it's to be seen whether a delay in the LLM world will really matter, but it's the principle of the thing. It's in Apple's interest to lock it down for them. Open up your apps with app intents to allow it to happen, but we're not going to give you the ability as a developer to, do image recognition in this, or do your podcast transcription on this, or correct your grammar inside of your app based on the things that we've learned that would keep you even more in the platform. It's so short-sighted and so anti-competitive, and this stuff, which we've talked about, well, for the 3 years we've been podcasting, it's not getting better, is it?
No, it's not getting better, is it? And I think that's the key, isn't it? Apple and Google and others have slowly been forced to do things because they haven't done it themselves. And then you end up with the EU legislating on minutiae such as, AirPlay, AirDrop, and having alternatives to work across platforms. And if this all comes to pass, it would be fantastic if you've got that interoperability between Apple and other devices. I think it'd be really cool. I'm quite excited to see some of this, if I'm honest, because never have I been more open, I think, to having different vendor-based hardware in my house.
I think this is it. And one thing that all the big companies lose sight of is your operating system, be it your phone, be it your computer, be it your vision, whatever it is a means to an end for you to get out what you need to do. It's to do your work, or it's to watch your film, or it's to write a letter, or to send an email. And all of them can do that. And to that degree to which they lock you in is just for them to make money. You can get something open source and make all these things work. But it's the slipperiness of this, and I think they're really at risk of annoying people to such a degree that they will start to look elsewhere. We saw Microsoft do it with Copilot. I think we're seeing Apple do it with this increasing lock-in. And you get the vibe, a word my daughter likes an awful lot, from the community, that it's not just us. American developers feel the same. All the podcasts I'm listening to, this feeling of resentment, even John Gruber is beginning to turn on Apple. And that's amazing to me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like, it isn't just us here in the UK or in people in the EU. It is even people are a lot closer to home for Apple. Yeah, I'm hoping they're listening, but I wonder they're not.
Yeah, one thing that makes me think they're not is that in Brazil, we talked about last week, they had 90 days to enable side loading. Well, they managed to get that postponed for now in Brazil through appeal.
Just get on with it. Stop fighting it. Get on with it. Like, come on, Apple. You're bigger than this.
This is the problem when you've got all the money. You can just go back to the lawyers, though, can't you?
But they keep telling us how they look after their users and they do things for the right reasons, until it comes to things like side loading and interoperability. Then they're not doing it for the right reasons. They're doing it to line their pockets.
And they've got enough in there already. Another company that very much likes to line its pockets that we've talked about before is Hewlett Packard. Hewlett Packard are famous for bricking printers if you put the wrong ink in your inkjet, or at least not printing until you put the right ink in your inkjet. Well, they're now starting to do the same thing with laser printers. If you put the wrong toner in, they will stop your laser printer working. However, they've at least settled a lawsuit to say that they'll make the firmware updates optional, so you can stay in an old insecure version of the software, but at least keep printing.
I get why they've done that, but what happens if you've already updated your firmware in your printer to a version that won't let you use third-party cartridges? I
just think it's gross. They want to sell the razor and the razor blades, and that's very profitable of your Gillette, but you want to buy the best printer for the job, and Hewlett Packard ink is expensive, and Hewlett Packard toner and imaging drums and fuser kits and all that stuff that you have to deal with for laser printing is expensive. Have you ever taken a big color laser printer apart?
Nope.
In my previous life as an IT guy, I took quite a few apart, and they're very complicated things, and they go through a lot of ink, particularly in an office environment where you're printing lots and lots of things. You want to save a few quid here and there, and I just think it's gross that Hewlett Packard, you've made the investment in the printer. I'd rather have a more expensive printer and cheaper toner than the other way around.
Completely agree, and I've suffered this problem. I've got an HP printer at home. The firmware updated one day and then went, you can't print. I was like, what do you mean I can't print? And then I Googled it, and then it's like, oh, okay. Actually, I DuckDuckGo'd it. And then it's like, okay, I've put it in the third-party cartridge. They worked fine. And now I've got to take the third-party cartridge out and throw them in the bin and go and buy ones twice the price from HP. It is very frustrating.
It's very frustrating. Yeah, so at least don't update your HP laser printer firmware anytime soon is probably the moral of the story.
It's too late for me, I think, as you've seen, the ship sailed. But surely there's a better way. Surely to settle the lawsuit, there'd be an option to go prefer first-party cartridges to third-party cartridges. Maybe it is a setting, but it seems crazy to me.
I think the only company that don't do this at the moment are Brother, and even there was a hint a couple of weeks back that they were doing the same sort of thing as well. So it's just another example of the lock-in all these companies have got us in.
And that's the key, isn't it? Is the lock-in.
Yeah. Somebody that was trying to give us an escape from that lock-in was Asahi Linux on Macs anyway. So this was the Fedora version of Linux that some very talented developers had managed to get up and running on Apple Silicon. There was a story 3 weeks ago now, I think, that the lead developer Hector Martin and Lena, who did the graphics driver, managed to get Apple libraries running in Vulkan emulation on Linux, so you could do clever graphical things on games via the Steam Proton layer. More devs have left the Sahi Linux project. This is a bit of a problem, I think, for them.
It's not good, is it? It is not good at all. It's always bad when good people leave. It's a bit of a concern.
Yeah, I mean, all this seems to stem from Linus Torvalds not wanting Rust, which is a programming language inside of the Linux kernel. The Sahi Linux team had been using quite a lot of Rust, and there's been a lot of pushback against that. That's certainly why Hector Martin left. This seems to be an ongoing thing. I hope the project continues. Apple make great hardware. The fact you could choose another operating system to run on there, as we've just said with printers, should be down to the buyer rather than down to Apple. If we drop $2,000 on a laptop, I don't think it's unreasonable. If you want to run Linux on there, you should be allowed to.
I completely agree. I'd like to be able to run Windows and play some more games on my Mac Mini, but sadly I can't because I've got a gaming PC and a Mac. It would be nice just to have one device for both purposes.
Yeah, I get it, and it should be your choice if you want to run Windows, Mac, Linux, toaster operating system on there. It should be up to you.
Agreed.
Anyway, this is sad news for the Sahi Linux project. I'm still determined to try it at one point. Unfortunately, my Mac laptop is too new. It's an M3, so they only go up to M2 at the moment. Sahi. I think they're prioritizing this on the roadmap for what's coming next. So the project isn't dead. It continues. But I think without some of these talented developers, it might be a bit slower.
Yeah, and hopefully they recruit some more resource.
Hopefully so. There's always people who want to hack on a kernel. Briefly back to our first story, I'd forgotten I'd included this link. This is the call for a sovereign fund to escape Uncle Sam, i.e. Big American tech companies. There should be some way of bringing forward European companies to replace those services to which we become reliant on American projects for. I think this can only be a good thing. It'll certainly spur a bit of innovation and sort of collaboration and competition amongst European software developers and hardware developers. Probably a good thing.
It does feel like we need some startups to start challenging some of the big tech because there's little options out there. Are we going to see a competitor to Azure spin up out of Europe? It'd be quite exciting, I think, and there's an opportunity there. I think there is a real opportunity.
There very much is, compared to Azure, compared to Amazon EPS3. And if you think about it, and it's only just occurred to me from reading this article from the Register, the Airbus, European company, has done incredibly well on the global scale.
Yep.
Big American airlines are buying Airbus aircraft because they're better and they fall out of the sky a little less.
Or the doors fall off less.
Or the doors fall off, or they don't do awful things. Well, they're still aircraft. They're still liable to do all these things. But so far, so good as far as Airbus is concerned. And they make software to go on those things. So Airbus themselves are quite a large software provider. Dassault Systems make fighter jets. There are big companies involved with this kind of push. And I think pushing forward Europe's ability, and I include us within that as well. There's some innovative UK companies as well. And we are technically, physically part of Europe, even if we're not.
We're part of Europe as a continent, aren't we? We're just not part of the EU, which is a shame, but it is what it is.
It is what it is, but I feel the sort of current process and what's going on in America is pushing us closer to Europe again.
Yeah, definitely. I think we are more. It does feel like we're closer to Europe than we have been in the last 5 years.
Definitely. And again, as we said before, a big surprise to me was John Gruber actually getting quite upset about the state of Apple AI. So this is now the second article I've read from Gruber, saying he's got real problems with the turn of the company. He still seems very anti-EU from one of the other articles I read this week. But in this story about Apple needs to get out of the way with AI, this is basically saying if Apple can't have an LLM running on the phone, they need to let somebody else do that. They need to let interoperability with ChatGPT or Gemini or Anthropic or one of the other big providers. And I guess that's fair.
Yeah, and look, maybe it shows maybe Microsoft did the right thing by partnering with OpenAI to get them up and going. Maybe Apple should have done something similar rather than try and bake it in-house and spectacularly fail. They could have done something to partner with somebody, to buy somebody to advance their tech, but they chose to do it themselves. And they've done it under the Siri moniker, and the Siri branding's not been good, has it? And this has just poured more fuel on the Siri fire. I think it's good though that Gruber is coming out and not banging the Apple drum, and is again, and he's pointing out where Apple have failed, because I think some things he's been too biased, in my opinion. But in this, it's great to see him be a lot more balanced. Hopefully he still gets invited to Apple events, but I think he's fair to call it out. And I guess it is tricky when you're in that space, how far you you do call them out on things because you may not get invited again, or you may not get the pre-release hardware or whatever it may be. So I'm glad he's done it. I think he's doing the right thing, and hopefully it keeps his credibility as a reporter going, because he is calling them out. But yeah, Apple have massively cocked up here, haven't they? They were late to the party. They announced a bunch of stuff that they hadn't really got in the bag. They then marketed a bunch of stuff they hadn't got in the bag. And then here we are about to head towards the next developers conference. And what are they going to do? Just replay last year's and promise us all the stuff last year's definitely coming this year? I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder if consumers, I don't know if they fell for it last time, but they certainly won't fall for it again. And developers definitely won't. To promise such a thing that never came to pass in an already skeptical developer community, I think burned by Vision OS, burned by the way Apple have treated them for all the reasons we've said the EU are sort of taking them to task, burning companies like Epic. And then this, and advertising it, and it feels like marketing got in front of their ability. And I'm sure the stock price went up as a consequence. In fact, I remember that it did. So there's always been a tension in the company between the marketing and their ability to deliver, and largely they've delivered up till now. This is a high-profile failure.
I wonder though, it is a high-profile failure, but if you speak to my children and my wife, they don't know of any features they're missing because they didn't know they were going to get them anyway, if that makes sense. That their marketing hadn't permeated to them. So I think a lot of consumers, probably in the same space, they're not really missing anything because they didn't know about all the stuff that Apple were working on, because they don't pay that much attention to it. So I think they've done some damage, but it's not as bad as it could be.
I think that's fair, but only because Google and Samsung and whoever else makes phones have been just as bad. The failure of the Humane Pin, the failure of the Rabbit R1 haven't shown there's a compelling alternative. The phone is still the best option to this, and as Jason Snell says, people love their phones. But if Google had released a phone that AI'd everything and was an absolute technical marvel, your kids might have heard about it because somebody at school would have one and they could show all the cool stuff that they could do with their phone that actually worked. And you and I both know LLMs aren't the answer to everything, but very clever integration for the things that they are good at could actually make a better device. And Google or Samsung or nothing are perfectly placed to capitalize on that. And Apple's fear must be that one of them are going to do that. And when that happens, people won't stand in queue for an iPhone. They'll stand in queue for the cool thing. Now, LLM's not there yet, but who knows? The way China dropped DeepSeek or whatever comes next, some no-name manufacturer releases a phone with true useful AI LLM integration. Apple are going to have to watch out for that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it is a concern. I think some of the features Google have got is definitely ahead of what Apple's got, obviously. I think it's going to be an interesting time for them.
I agree. Should we do some news?
Let's do it.
First story, and sticking with a theme of things flip-flopping, US Mac growth from the last couple of years appears that Microsoft have as much to play with that. I think it was a perfect storm. I think this is a bit of a simplistic thing to say. The introduction of Windows 11 and trusted platform computing and all the rest of it, consumers not upgrading, may be one reason why consumers weren't going and buying Windows machines again. I don't feel there was a lot of love for Windows 11. I think they made it more difficult than it had to be. They've had some missteps with things like, I want to say Copilot, but I forgot what Microsoft Recall.
That's that's died a very quiet death, hasn't it?
I think because it's such a massive security issue. All the enterprises will have switched it off, and most consumers who know what it is do not want it. That's an example of an LLM, or a piece of AI technology that was not demanded. So on one level, I get this, I think people are interested. They see Macs, they look cool, they look sexy, they look interesting, and then you had the Apple Silicon boost as well, where they actually got better. And, if you're there on the train with your Dell using friend or colleague and the laptop dies in 20 minutes and you're still going 9 hours later, that's going to turn someone's head, isn't it?
100%. I mean, I've been on the train quite a lot lately, and you see people with MacBook Airs and Pros, and they're all largely Apple Silicon based ones, and they've got that amazing battery life. Apple Silicon really transformed the Mac. If you think about it, we still are using the same OS, but Apple Silicon transformed the speed, the noise with the fan or lack of fans needed, and then the battery life. Those three things is just insane for the performance you get. And I think that's why there's a resurgence, an interest in Mac. And equally at the same time, they've tweaked all the industrial design of all the Macs, I think now. Maybe not the Mac Pro, but everything else but the Mac Pro. Everything's had a slight tweak. The Air's probably had the biggest one. We've had the new Mac Mini that you and I have got. We've had the Studio, and then the MacBook Pro is just slightly tweaked, but in all the right ways. And they've come out of it with extra ports on. They've listened to feedback. They've made it cool again. I think they've done a great job.
Yep, I agree. They're great laptops, and I think that's what consumers have responded to. Again, with everything we've talked so far, we'll see how far that goes, because if they're dropped in the same bucket as Microsoft at this point. And in some ways, I think they're behaving now in the way that Microsoft did back in their antitrust days. They're very anti-competitive. But, they are great hardware. They are mediocre software, but the apps are still good. And that's why, for now, you've really got to keep buying Apple laptops, isn't it? But we'll see how long that lasts. But anyway, I think it's just one factor, the Windows 10 factor. I think there's a lot of things that Apple have done right recently in comparison to Windows PCs and Microsoft. And I feel a bit bad for Microsoft that the Snapdragon laptops didn't take off in the way that they wanted them to, because they really had potential to come back quite hard there.
Yeah, I started evaluating them for work, but we've paused it until all the software supports them, because they would be fantastic work devices. Yeah,
they really would. This is a story related to what we were talking about earlier about Siri and the way Apple were advertising it. But this is actually a lawsuit now has been brought to pass in America, filed on behalf of plaintiff Peter Landschaft as a proposed class action lawsuit that basically the consumers were lied to when it comes to new Siri.
100%. New Siri isn't here yet, and we were promised it was coming to hardware, and we needed to buy a new phone to get it unless you had an iPhone 15 Pro, which not many people probably did have, comparative to the rest of the market. So some people have got a fair claim here of going, I bought this new phone because you promised me lots of stuff and it's not come. So it kind of goes back to what we said earlier. I think a lot of people probably were completely unaware of a lot of Apple Intelligence stuff, but they definitely marketed it and they definitely lent into it.
Yeah, and they marketed it really badly, and we commented a couple of times about how bad that marketing was, and it's going to come back and bite them.
Yeah, and Apple do have trouble with this sometimes when they bring out new OSs, in that it gets messy for people to go, well, when's this feature coming? You've said it's coming in the future, but you won't tell us when it's coming. And it was amazing that I remember them saying like Apple AI was coming to the UK. I think it was in December. They actually put a date on it, which they don't often do. You don't often see that for the iOS releases. So yeah, I think they've got in hot water, so hopefully they're going to learn from this. I do wonder, though, are they going to double down more on secrecy after this and not tell us so much?
The problem is, this hitting Apple with class action lawsuits, I don't think it does that much. All the consumers involved get a couple of quid or a couple of dollars. Apple pay a fine, which tends to be negotiated down and down and down, and they can afford it.
And the world moves on.
And the world moves on, whereas what the EU's tack is about actually making them fundamentally change what they do and its interoperability is better than just the consumers. Because who's going to get rich out of this? Lawyers.
Always the lawyers.
Always the lawyers. I mean, the Bendgate or Casegate or whatever it was gave us all new bumpers for our phones, but
I used to like my bumper. But bumpers have kind of gone away. I wish they'd make a comeback.
I'm rocking a Chris at the moment. I'm going caseless.
Yes, do it.
It makes me nervous, I must say.
Do you know what? I'm 2 years in. I'm fine with it.
You're fine with it.
It's the children I feel sorry for, because they're going to get a dinged hand-me-down, though.
Fair enough. Something I'm definitely fine with are the French pushing back on encrypted messaging. So this was a debate in the French National Assembly to maintain confidentiality of encrypted messaging. So this is in Le Mans this week actually, published yesterday. Voting, it was quite tense, but they're going to allow people within France to have two-factor authentication and encrypted messaging within their messaging services. Hooray! Sensible lawmaking.
Sounds perfectly normal, doesn't it?
I would have said so. It's only the UK that are passing stupid laws, isn't it?
Yeah, it does sadly feel that the UK are, doing the stupid laws.
Very stupid laws. So, as per title of last week's show, Vive la France.
Vive la France. Yeah, I like it.
Moving along. Big malware phishing attack made against Mac users. It's just one to be aware of, really. This is a Windows scam that was ongoing before. The goal of the scam is to steal your Apple account. On Microsoft computers, they look like official system dialogues were popping up, asking you to put in details, and it appears this kind of phishing attempt is now widespread on Macs. With security features rolled out, Microsoft Chrome and Firefox attackers have shifted the focus to Mac users in this particular case. So, Yeah, you get a pop-up on the website. Looks something like you'd expect the operating system vendor to give you, and then they fish your details out. So just one for people to be careful of, really.
Yeah, you often see these, don't you? I think I had it with one of my parents going, Chris, I've got this thing saying about phishing on my iPhone or something, and they sent me a screen grab, and I was like, just delete it, just close the tab, because it is fake. But people keep trying it, and they must get a success rate from it because they're still publishing these new campaigns.
Yep, it definitely seems to work, doesn't it?
Yeah, sadly.
Be careful out there, folks.
Agreed.
Another thing to be careful of is if you're still rocking a 3G phone, the combined Virgin Media O2 conglomerate has begun to switch off 3G network in the north of England. So I do still occasionally see 3G when I'm around the country.
Yeah, I was about to say this, and I was also thinking about So yes, I still see 3G every now and again. So I'm a little worried that we're going to start not having that 3G. Does that mean they haven't upgraded everywhere to 4 5G yet? But equally, does this mean that cellular modems are going to get simpler in the future because they're not going to have to support the older bands? Like when Apple bring out their C3 or whatever, a couple of years from now, are they going to go, look, this is just a 5G cellular modem. We don't need to do that other stuff anymore because it's dead.
Do these things ever get simpler?
Well, I guess you've then got satellite to support instead. I don't know.
I look at my broadband, and they haven't really changed much in size, but I know the number of antennas inside of them is like doubling every generation.
Yeah, I don't use my broadband router, but you're right though, and it amazes me how Eero pilot into a relatively small device.
Wireless access point, I should have said.
Yep.
They're the same physical size, but there's more antennas in them.
Yeah, I guess there's more bands to support it in Wi-Fi, but at some point you've got to deprecate the old stuff.
You do. And 3G, I tell a lie, I saw Edge the other day actually pop up on my phone, and I haven't seen that in a very long time.
Yeah, I do think moving to 3, 4, 5G makes a lot more sense because you used to get Edge. Wasn't there another one you get as well? G maybe, I think, for GPRS.
GPRS, yeah. GPRS.
And I never knew which one was better than the other.
I do remember the original iPhone was Edge, wasn't it? It was the iPhone 3G came with 3G, so that's 2007.
That was the second phone.
Yeah, that's we're terrifyingly old, really, Chris, aren't we?
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Should we talk about some rumours for a change?
Talk about some what? Oh, rumours. Yes.
We don't do a lot of rumours. We tend to wait for them actually to come out. So this is a potentially leaked case from the iPhone 17 Air, which to me looks very like the Google Pixel bar across the back of the phone, sort of cut out in it.
Yeah, so we don't normally do a lot of rumours because I get a bit bored of rumours, if I'm honest. I want to wait and see until I've got some tangible. But this does feel quite concrete in that rather than having, I'm just looking at the back of my iPhone, rather than having the square in the corner of the Pro phone, we're going to have this longer bar. And the Air, they're rumoured to have a Pro as the top end phone, and then an Air, and then the regular phone. And it is interesting, the Air looks like it's going to have, I think, one camera, but this elongated bar as you've got in the screen grab. And I quite like the idea of having a new visual design. I like the idea that the phone may be able to sit and not wobble because it will be hopefully a symmetrical raised bit all the way across the back of the phone. So I think it's looking kind of cool. I've got my eye on the Air because I wonder if this is the phone I'm going to get. I do take a lot of photos, but actually I largely only use the one lens. And if they're going to upgrade it and I can still do macro photography and I can do everything that mine does, I would be quite tempted with this because I think the pros are reaching that point now where they are going more pro. You can do all the slow motion stuff, you can do all the video recording in all the, really high standards, which I don't touch any of that stuff. So I do wonder whether this is the phone for the the enthusiast phone is what I'm going to say. You've got the run-of-the-mill phone, the enthusiast phones, and then the pro phone. So I'm really curious by the Air. I think it sounds quite interesting. I think what's going to get it is when you pull up the comparisons page and what features have been cut out of it that are in the Pro, and is the cost differential worth it?
Yeah, I'm with you on this. I think that having that all-in-one bar across the top is definitely going to be an interesting look for the phone. It's kind of, I don't think you'll get the loss of distinctive looks in the way that the Pixel has that sort of command bar across the top of it. This will sort of maintain its iPhone look. Moving on to the second part of the rumor, it's going to be allegedly a lot thinner, Air thinner. And there's some X links that I'm not going to click through on because I'm not going to give X the click-throughs about how much thinner it's going to be. and it does look, half sort of the width of the existing iPhone. I don't know whether it's the Pro or the Max based on those cutouts, but these leaks are definitely getting better and more accurate from the case manufacturers and sort of where the molds are for them, aren't they?
Yeah, we are seeing a lot, and it's good and bad in a way. It's great. These all look quite exciting. I think it's going to be a bit of a disappointing reveal. That's the bit. It's interesting. So much seems to have come out though, because normally we don't get a lot. Apple have been quite good in recent times, I think, of keeping things secret. So it's amazing how much this is leaking. I'm super interested by the Air. It looks small. It looks great. It looks thin and light. It's everything I want. The devil's going to be in the detail, and that's obviously what we don't know yet. But the look of it's quite cool. And I wonder if they're elongating this bar now. It doesn't look like they really need to have this elongated bar yet. But I wonder if this is them slowly teeing themselves up to have a much bigger camera bar so they can do more camera stuff. They've got that bar then. But it also then changes the look of the iPhone so that actually then future releases that maybe do take advantage of the bar don't need an industrial design change. And this is going to be the next 5 years of iPhone look and feel, is going to be this elongated bar, whereas for the last maybe longer than 5 years it's been the square mesa in the corner with the 2 or 3 cameras and LiDAR and stuff. So I'm quite excited about it. It's always nice when we get new or tweaked industrial design that's a bit significant, and this is probably it.
It is. My reservation about all this is that what else will they do? A cost cut? Are these going to have OLED screens? Are these going to have ProRes screens? Apple are very nickel and dime, but they give with one hand and they take away with the other. So your iPhone 17 Air is going to be nice and thin, but it's only going to have a 6-hour battery life, or it's going to have a low refresh rate screen, or it's not going to have an always-on display, or something that they're going to take away. And when we looked at that Nothing phone for 300 quid, that had 120 hertz, that had 12-hour battery, had all the things in it at a lower end, it worries me that Apple are going to up the price of this thing, probably somewhere between the standard iPhone and the iPhone Pro, and cut features out just because it's thinner.
I wonder if the iPhone 17 Air will come in at the same price that our Pros roughly cost this year, say, and will probably be the similar spec to this year's Pro, I guess, and the Pro will then be the year ahead kind of thing, and will the Air be that year behind? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how they frame it.
It is, and it's a phone year, is it? If we're buying phones this year, we'll have to see how that goes.
Well, my 13-year-old son has already got his eyes on mine, and I've said as soon as I buy a phone, he can have it. So I think I'm in for it. I'm in for a phone at some point this year, I think.
Car Corner,
yeah.
Car Corner, 2 small stories. First one, just cool for those of us that are EV owners. This is a story in Ars Technica about BYD, a Chinese company called Build Your Dreams. They make cars called the Dolphin and the Sea Lion and all sorts of nautical-sounding aquatic animals.
And the Funky Cat.
They do. They didn't. They bought that. I think the Aura Funky Cat was originally Aura, but I think it may be BYD. A ridiculously under-batteried car, and that's a nice segue for me to say this is BYD showing the ability to add in 5 minutes charge time, 250 miles of range. I saw a thing in Top Gear about this as well, and this is just incredible.
Yeah, this is what EV owners want, isn't it? And also EV skeptics. If you can start having this, and I've said it before, I think if the batteries you and I have in our EVs today are the worst they're ever going to be, the future's quite bright. I can do 300 miles on mine. I charge it overnight at my house. It's really easy. I don't have to go to a petrol station. It's a great commuter's car. I actually like my EV. I'm going to be sad to see it go in a couple of months' time, and I don't know yet what I'm going to replace it with, but I do like my EV. I like my petrol car as well, but the EV for a commuter's car is fantastic. And this stuff will, like I say, hopefully help get people to a comfortable place.
But this, I think, is the thing that's been holding a lot of EV buyers back. It's that, I've got to stop and I've got to charge it for, they don't know, an hour, 2 hours, however long it takes. And you and I know it takes 20 minutes to top up your battery on a fast charger, a bit more overnight.
I've depleted my battery before and charged it all the way in like 45 minutes to 60 minutes. So it's really not that scary.
Yeah, 20 to 80% on a reasonable charger. And my car only charges at 175 kilowatts, the current one. The Tesla was a little faster, and we know it's a curve. It does begin to decrease. The lower you come in with, the higher rate you get at the start. But 20 minutes is usually enough on a fast charger to get me back up to 80%. This, 5 minutes, maintains that charging curve over it as well. So this is quite incredible. And if you think the fastest chargers in the UK at the moment, I think are 450 kilowatts. There's a couple of them somewhere. This is 1,000 kilowatts. That's incredible.
That is incredible. And it's only going to get better, isn't it? The network's going to get better. I do worry, though, whether we're going to go a little bit backwards with EVs, because obviously, all the car manufacturers are slowing down a little bit. Everybody's not being as aggressive with their targets. So is the charging infrastructure actually going to take longer to roll out?
Well, I do know that the car tax situation is changing in the UK as of next month, and it will no longer be free in the UK. So
that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Another thing that does surprise me slightly are the sort of rise of sporty EVs. So lots of EVs are quite quick off the mark. Mine is ridiculous. I think 2.9 not to 60 time. But this is the new Renault 5 Turbo, in inverted commas, gets 536 brake horsepower, 3,540 foot-pounds of torque, and a handbrake, which is cool for an EV. And actually, I think this is a funky-looking little car.
Yeah, and it's got a bit of retro. It leans back to the 80s, 90s Renault 5 Turbo. So I quite like some of what they've done. I like it when a car manufacturer can lean into their heritage in a good way. Like Mini obviously did it when they relaunched. I think the Renault 5 looks kind of cool.
I think the standard Renault 5 looked kind of cool. So that for those who are watching on YouTube, the standard one, not the Renault 5 3e Turbo that we've just been talking about, is a good-looking little car at a reasonable price. So I think this is great by Renault to sort of push this forward. And on the same page is actually the Ioniq 5N, which is another turbo version of an electric car. And it's good that I think electric car manufacturers are moving beyond the fact that they're just appliances into they've got a bit of soul in the same way a sporty car would have had once upon a time.
Yeah, that's what led me into getting mine. I've got the M equivalent of Beamer's, electrified car, and it's been pretty good. It's got a bit of something in it. It's just my only gripe is the weight. I think the weight's got to come down on these batteries, and it will come down over time.
It will come down over time, and all electric cars are heavy. I mean, it's unfortunate, I think, that all cars seem to be heavier these days. Most people buy SUVs. They don't need SUVs, but they buy SUVs because they're a little bit higher up or whatever the reason is. And they're heavier. And, one of the most polluting parts of the car is actually the tyres. The particles that come off tyres as you drive along isn't helped by having massively heavy cars.
Yeah, agreed. And obviously roads are, I don't know what it's like in Wales, but roads are suffering, I think, for having their heavier cars, pounding them every day.
Yeah, I don't know. Potholes are pretty bad around here.
Agreed.
Shall we move on and do some media?
Just quickly, did you get an update for your Volvo? Is that come out now so you can use Apple Car keys? Oh, okay. I didn't. This wasn't scripted for the listeners. I just saw a link and I meant to bring it up with you.
Yes, my car was updated to software version 1.5.2 and the app was updated to 1.8 point something. And the promise of Apple CarPlay, of Apple Car Key, sits in my wallet. Can I add it to my phone? Can I ek? I've tried 20, 30 times now in a variety of ways. Lots of owners, I've been looking at the forums, have been able to make it work, but I just can't. I've got the most up-to-date version of the operating system. I've got the most up-to-date. I've started phones. I've logged in and out. Don't show me your car key, Chris. That's no good to me. Will it open my Volvo? No.
No, but I do use it all the time.
Yeah, and I used to use it all the time on my Tesla, but can I get it? And it's very frustrating when I look in the forums and it's like, yeah, it took 30 seconds, boom, I can now open my car and drive it away with my phone. And I'm like, nope. I've even got in touch with Volvo customer support. I should probably tell them I've got a podcast. You never know. Don't you know who I am? And to be fair to them, they tried a couple of things, but I can't make it work. I'm very upset about it.
Maybe you need to wait for a further update because they've got some bugs maybe with the rollout. But that is frustrating.
It's extremely frustrating. Should we do some media?
Yes, let's move on.
So instead of something that's annoying me, here's something I very much enjoyed. It was the season finale of season 2 of Severance yesterday, available from Apple TV Plus. You can see the ratings from the critics at 95%. I'm surprised they're so low from the audience because what an excellent season it's been. I mean, I'd say maybe one episode was maybe not quite as strong as it could have been, but overall it felt like a stronger season to me than season 1. And the finale was amazing. Very impressive. So what a great TV show. Absolutely swept along with it.
Yeah, this is one I've got to go back and watch, and I want to rewatch season 1 because I've forgotten most of it. So that's something I want to do, but I think I've been put off it because my commitment's so big because I want to recap season 1. But I do want to get on with it. I'm surprised by the scores as well because I've only heard nothing but good things about Severance. I've even heard people in the local supermarket talking about it at the checkout line. So I'm glad it's good, and I do need to sort myself out and get on with it.
It's a terrific show. And obviously Apple agree because it was officially announced that it's coming back for season 3 as well.
Yeah, and surely Apple were investing in it because they did that stint at Grand Central Station, didn't they, where they had the box and Severance employees in it and stuff. So they're clearly well invested in it. And it's one of their breakthrough shows, I think, that's entered a bit more of the mass population.
Definitely got more of a mainstream feel. Although one reason they might be a little bit hesitant to it, and this was a story that broke this week as well, is that apparently Apple is losing $1 billion a year on their minimally viewed Apple TV Plus service. What do you think of this?
I think I'm not surprised by this. I think there's a lot of people out there who still don't understand how to watch Apple TV Plus. I think Apple misfired when they first released it. We spoke just weeks ago about, wasn't Apple TV already on the Android devices? I think they need to have a marketing campaign to push. Like, Apple TV is everywhere, kind of like a Netflix. It's everywhere. You may not have the button for it, but you can literally watch it on any of your devices. You don't need Apple hardware. And I think that's really been putting people off.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I'm going to tell you about another TV show that's come back, and that is Wheel of Time. Did we talk about Wheel of Time last time?
It's not ringing a bell. Sorry, I was just having a moment. I don't recall.
Okay, so Wheel of Time is based on a series of books. I think there's 15 books. Sort of very Tolkien-esque in the sense that there's trolls and warriors and orcs and elves and magic users and all this kind of stuff. Not exactly like that. It tends to be sort of humans, and the concept of the books is that everybody's reincarnated eventually. So there's like ages come to pass, heroes are born and die, but eventually it all comes around again and you're reincarnated as somebody else later on in your life. And the previous age, there'd been a catastrophe, the bad guy had got out, they'd managed to put him back, but all manner of complicated things ensue. You can imagine with 15 books it's quite hard to summarise in like 20 seconds of me talking about it. Anyway, Amazon have made a TV show of it. Season 3 came out 2 weeks ago. There are 4 episodes of it have launched. I watched episode 4 last night. They've done a really good job on this. Phenomenal acting, great special effects, particularly the image of how the magic is sort of a very tapestry weaving element to the magic, and they portray that extremely well on the TV show. So it's definitely not up your street, Chris, but I've thoroughly enjoyed Wheel of Time season 3 coming back, and I think my enjoyment of it is sort of supported by both the critics and the audience.
Yeah, it looks a reasonable score there. Who's the lady as the main actress I can see in front of me?
Rosamund Pike.
That's it. I was looking at her and thinking Gone Girl, and I was fairly confident, but I couldn't think of her name for the life of me. Thank you.
Yeah, Rosamund Pike is probably the best known actress in it. There's a lot of up-and-comers who've been cast as sort of the heroes to come. Lots of British actors and actresses in it as well, actually, that pop up. Yeah, really good show. Definitely worth a watch in terms of who's in it and who you can see.
Cool. No, it looks good.
Do you want to tell us about Dope Thief?
Yeah, so I've actually got an Apple TV Plus one that I've started watching, and for me it's good, I think, when I pick one up and there's only 1 or 2 episodes that have been released, because I can get into my weekly rhythm of watching it and it's not a burden. So I think there's 3 episodes of Dope Thief out. I've watched all 3. It drops every Friday. It's got only one actor in it that most people will know, and that's Ving Rhames, who was obviously in Pulp Fiction and Mission Impossible. And do you know what? It's quite an interesting film. It's the 2 main characters basically pretend to be DEA agents and go and take people's dope and drugs off them, hence why it's called Dope Thief. And then obviously something happens and the story unfolds from there. But not my usual thing I'd watch. Interesting that the scores seem to average out between reviewers and popcorn meters, and it's actually really good. I've enjoyed it. I've been watching it while I've been running on the treadmill, and I've been quite engrossed in it. So I just think it's well done. It's got a good look. It's some of it's a little far fetched maybe, but on the whole, I think it's really cool, and it's a nice season. I think it's just nice to see something different, I guess. So I would recommend. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed all the cast. I think they've all done a really good job. Very strong.
Well, Brian Tyree Henry is the voice of Miles Morales' dad in the Spider-Man animated film, so I know him quite well. He's very good. And Kate Mulgrew was, of course, Captain Janeway in Star Trek Voyager, so another extremely well-known actor.
I will take your word for that.
Also, Orange is the New Black. She was in that too as one of the prisoners. You not seen that either. Dear, oh dear.
Yeah, there's big chasms in my knowledge here, but I would recommend this. I've really enjoyed it, and like I said, it's quite an interesting concept how it starts out. And you know, I can't obviously rate the whole season, but the first 2 episodes I've enjoyed, and I'm looking forward to the next one dropping. Yeah, it's nice when you get something, and probably like you with Severance, you're looking forward to the next one dropping. And I do wish more things would come out weekly than everything all at once, and you just end up splurging it. I think I quite enjoy the weekly drop of one episode.
Fair enough. Oppenheimer.
I've rewatched Oppenheimer, as you do when you've got 3 hours spare. You can rewatch Oppenheimer. Do you know what? I hadn't seen this since I saw it in the cinema last year. I bought it ages ago on Apple TV, and it's just been sat there. I thought I really want to go back and rewatch it. But again, slightly put off, I think, because of the time commitment. But you know what? I watched it in about 2 sittings. What a good film. Just such a good film. And I do like the way Christopher Nolan, A, retells a story, but B, he's very good at doing the dialogue and keeping it engrossing and how it's all cut together. And it didn't feel like I watched a 3-hour film. It still stands up. A year later, who knew? It's really good.
I'm not in the slightest surprise. I did watch it again, I must say, not long after it came out. It is a great show. It's a great film, and it's always worth another rewatch, I think. As most Christopher Nolan films are. You know, I put Tenet on the other day just to test my video streaming thing, and sat watching it for 20 minutes because I couldn't tear my eyes away because it just looks so good.
It does look so good. And Oppenheimer, though, I mean, what an amazing story. Just the whole, how they invested so much money and set up a whole town and told all that story, and then the conflict of, are we doing the right thing? You know, that we've done all the theoretical science, now it's actually going to get used. And it's taken off of him, and he has no control over it. Which was, you know, he's given birth to this baby, and then it's not his anymore. So just fantastic. I love Christopher Nolan films, so I thought it was good.
And shout out to the Barbenheimer pitch meeting, which you should probably go and watch. It's 6 minutes of your time well spent. If you remember, Oppenheimer and Barbie came out about the same time. I went to see them one day after the other. I know you didn't like Barbie, but you're wrong. Oppenheimer was a great film, but the pitch meeting guy is always worth a watch when it comes to these films for pointing out the obvious and glaring errors in them.
Oh, I'm sure there's some, but I still love it.
No, he does it quite reverently, but it's absolutely worth watching Pitch Meeting Guy because he's terrific.
Okay.
Games?
There's 2 games.
So, tell us about Commandos.
Yeah, for once I've actually got a game in here. So Commandos Origins, which we both played the demo of. It wasn't your bag, but it was 100% my bag. The game is coming out on the 8th of April. I have pre-ordered it. I don't often pre-order a game, but it had 10% off. And I thought, you know what? I really like this game. I'm going to buy it. And why wait? I'm sorry. It's the 9th of April it comes out, not the 8th. That's my mistake. But I'm dead looking forward to it. So I'm quite excited. This is a game I've been looking forward to the most all year. I know I've bought Civ. I've not played enough of it. But this, to me, I'm fairly confident I'm going to be investing some time in this. I would even be tempted to take a day off work to play it, I think, because it's not often I get a new game that I've been waiting for. I haven't bought any new games for ages because there hasn't been much out there that scratched my itch. But this I'm so excited by. Can't wait.
I hope you enjoy it very much. I won't be pre-ordering it.
Yeah, I thought as much. And for the listeners, this is a game. It was out in the late 90s, I think it was, and I played it a lot then. And I think the new studio that's taken it on has tried to keep fairly faithful to the aesthetic of the original. Obviously, hardware's moved on, but they've kept a lot of similarity and just advanced it. And yeah, I can't wait. This will be played some, and I'm sure we will discuss it on the show briefly.
Fair enough. I've found 5 minutes to have a quick go of Factorio. This is a bit like the Satisfactory game that we talked about before, but more top-down, not a 3D world, but easier on your hardware. Not that my hardware couldn't run it, but I just saw there was a demo available on Steam and I thought I'd give it a go. So there's a demo available of Factorio. All the comments on Steam are very interesting for it. that it appears to be like gaming crack. People pick it up and they can't put it down again once they get very much into it. I played the trailer for like 20 minutes and I thought, oh, yeah, I can kind of see this. I managed to stop at that point before I got addicted. But the idea is you crash land on a planet, you need to make systems up and running based on trains, and you start with nothing and you eventually build, quite incredible machines and trains and all sorts of things to keep your factory going. So if you're into that kind of thing, check out the demo and maybe you'll want to pick it up.
Yeah, I'm aware of some people, like you say, this is quite an addictive game. A few people I work with have mentioned this.
Well, the demo's there. It works Steam, Mac, Linux. There's nothing to stop you checking it out.
Ooh, Mac, did you say?
I did indeed.
Ooh, I might have to give that a go.
Well, it's a demo. What have you got to lose? Should we do a main show?
Let's do it.
So I think this will probably be a brief topic. Some of it will definitely rely on you. We've both been looking at password managers. I think for me, this was being driven by being reliant on large American. I think 1Password's actually Canadian, but large American companies for a lot of the things that they do, and paying a decent amount of money every month/year to keep that sort of password. And don't get me wrong, I do trust 1Password very, very much so with my data and my passwords and other things that are in there as well. But it seemed like a good time for us to have a reflection on what we're doing with passwords and what alternatives there are to it, because we're both 1Password customers, right?
Yeah, so historically I've got 1Password for free because my work account, you can link it to your personal account. And I think 1Password do a good job of that. If you use it for your work, you can give everybody that's got a login in a corporate space, a personal account. And so I've been using it for that. And it only costs £2.65 a month. So I'm leaving my job and therefore I'm losing my free account. It's not a huge amount of money, but I thought, you know what, maybe I should go and play with Apple Passwords, because I've encouraged all my family to use it, immediate family and slightly wider family. So I thought maybe I should just play with it, because I'm trying to get them to obviously all use randomized passwords, make sure they're saved in a passwords manager, especially like with my children, because they usually go, Dad, can you log me into something? And I want them to, understand good password hygiene and all of that. So anyway, long story short, what I've done is I've gone into 1Password on my Mac. I've exported all my passwords to a CSV. I've imported it into Apple Passwords. Again, all quite straightforward on the Mac. And then I've just started using it for about a week. And there's some things I like and some things I don't. The thing I like is the integration with Safari. It's first party. It doesn't pop up. It's not annoying. It just kind of works. You don't really think about it. It's a lot cleaner, I think, than 1Password. Big tick. The thing that I'm less keen on is the app isn't as good. It's a half-baked password app. Hasn't got all the features of 1Password and, all the comparisons and groupings and categories and stuff. But on the whole, for a free password app, it's all right. If this is their version 1, hopefully there's going to be a version 2 at some point that will be better. But for me, what I need to do, I think, is just do that comparison of what's 1Password offering me. Like, you can see it in your screen up there. There's the watchtower thing where they can tell you how good your password hygiene is and provide you a lot more tools for looking at it. So I'm just having a look into it at the moment. But the fact it doesn't nag me as much and is a lot more reliable in Safari is a big tick for me. You've then got the Passwords app on PC that you can now use. So at the moment, I'm sticking with Apple Passwords, but I reserve the right to go back to 1Password at any given moment. And I've got an account with them. It's on trial at the moment. But what I'm probably going to do is just export all my data out. And so I've got it in a 1Password format that I can always import back in if I decide to go back there. The £2.60 a month, I think, is quite reasonable of 1Password. I think that's very fair. What's that, £30 a year? That seems okay.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, of course, you're trusting Apple with your passwords, which is fine. They're relatively trustworthy when it comes to these things. You're only really using it on Macs. There is a Windows version of this. There is, but
I do have that on my gaming PC.
How well baked is it?
It's pretty good. It seems fairly feature rich.
Okay. So let's test that. What if you've got a QR code that you want to create a TOTP on Windows? Does it support that?
I have no idea.
Okay, well, that's a problem. So you create a Google account, it throws up the QR code. On Mac, well, on your phone, it can scan the QR code. I don't even know how that works. Presumably it works by being able to scrape the screen with the Passwords app on Mac.
I have no idea.
Dude, come on, you're meant to have done your research on this.
So
there you go.
I haven't really set up many new accounts this week, and I haven't used my Mac a huge amount. So there's bits like that I need to go and play with, I think. But what I quite like at the moment, though, is I've just taken my export out of 1Password. So I've got both password managers on the go. The thing that I think I'm worried about more with the Apple one is it's more reliance upon Apple, whereas I probably should be engineering myself for less reliance upon Apple.
Yeah, I mean, this wouldn't work for me because I want to use Linux machines as well, so I need a password manager that goes across all three. And the fact that you can't access this in a cloudy-based way, it's only going to work on a Windows machine or a Mac or a phone or an iPad, that's automatically limiting for me. And given my slight lack of faith in Apple at the moment, which has probably been evident for many people, that I wouldn't... It's not that I don't trust them, it's that I wouldn't trust them long-term at the moment. I think they're perfectly reputable, and I think you should use a password manager rather than not. I just don't think this is the right choice for me.
Yeah, I think for my wife and children it makes sense. I do worry for me it's not got enough tools in it, and I probably should have something a bit more comprehensive. And given that 1Password is only about £30 a year, I'm quite comfortable paying that bill.
And is this iCloud based as well? Do you have to pay for your Apple Plus subscription in order to keep this going?
I don't know.
Okay.
But I don't even know how you find that out. It is obviously all linked to your iCloud account, but would it work on a free iCloud account? I would imagine it would, because you'd be in the 5 gigabytes. So I don't think it's an iCloud Plus feature. I just think it's an iCloud feature.
It is a concern, isn't it? And you think, as with Apple having to drop back on advanced data protection in the UK, what else could they be forced to roll back on? And then whoever you want has got access to all your passwords too.
That's my kind of nervousness using it. So I think I've enjoyed futzing with it for 5 minutes, but I can see a world where I just delete all my passwords back out of it again.
So, from my point of view, 1Password is a great product. I have happily paid for it for a number of years after I got spooked with LastPass because they got hacked and all the passwords went away. So I had this very tedious job of going and, repairing all my passwords and all that kind of stuff. And I do use a password manager, and I do integrate it with my browser, and I do use third-party two-factor authenticators, passkeys, all the kinds of things that you get with that, which 1Password supports and Apple Password support. But I wanted that more open means of or cross-platform way of working. Like I say, I use the odd Linux PC, and it's been a very good steward on Linux as well. These days they've made the setup so much easier, where if you've got a device with 1Password authenticated on, it will flash a QR code up on the screen. You can bang your phone in, scan the QR code, and off you go, and you've authenticated that. It works well as an extension in Firefox, Safari, Chrome. All the major browsers are supported. I'm not limited to what I want, and there are first-party clients both from 1Password and from they're all from 1Password in order to do it, but I quite like that. And they made a decision a few years back to rewrite in Rust, I want to say, with the back end. So that upset a lot of Mac owners at that point, because they felt they lost functionality from version 10 or whatever the version of the 1Password client was before. So I stuck with them in this because I wasn't that bothered about it. As long as it will reliably fill in my passwords and let me store new ones, that was good enough for me. I have 786 passwords in 1Password.
I think you and I are in the same place for 1Password. I think it is very good, and the rewrite for me wasn't a problem. I have half what you have.
That's fair enough. I have a tendency to just try out new stuff as my problem. Anyway.
I must confess, though, I have 0 passkeys.
0, I have
I
3.
I haven't tried passkeys. I don't know why. I keep meaning to have a look, and then I just haven't.
Some work better than others, it must be said. Anyway, so 1Password, Apple Password, but you saying you were going to try out that made me go and do a bit of adventuring. So I went and checked out 2 other products that I thought would be interesting to have a look at in this space. The first one is entirely free. It's called KeePass, and there's a couple of modifications of KeePass, and the one I'm going to talk about here is called KeePass XE, KeePass cross-platform. I think it actually started out as a Windows application, KeePass, and the XE is the cross-platform side of it. It is entirely open source. Now, it does not look as good as 1Password or Apple Passwords, but it works really, really well. And the way it works is it creates a database file, an encrypted database file that you can authenticate using a password or a YubiKey or a key file or whatever else you want. But it expects to be able to find that key file somewhere. So what I've done is I've put it on my Nextcloud server that I was talking about at the top of the show and was my app last week. So that is now centralized somewhere on Nextcloud. I've installed Nextcloud on my Macs and my Linux box. I don't have a Windows PC at the moment, but if I did, it would work there too. And that keeps the file in sync. So you could potentially do this with iCloud as well. You could put it in iCloud, Google Drive, whatever. It's encrypted, so I'm fine with having it on a cloud-based service. I'm even more fine with having it on my cloud-based service because I'm managing the security of that, and I'm able to sync this across PCs. So, and it has a browser extension, so you can run it with Firefox or Safari or whatever else you want to do. It's probably worth saying at this point that there is an iOS client for this too. It's called Keepassium, which I will for the YouTube viewers I will fling up here now. Looks nice, works in the Mac App Store, works on the iOS and iPad as well. There is a fee to unlock it, which I haven't done yet, but it will use facial encryption or an alphanumeric code or something like that to unlock it after you've put in your longer password for the one time or however you authenticate it. The interesting thing about this is the Nextcloud client for iOS actually unlocks into files as a trusted vendor. So in the same way that OneDrive and Dropbox do, Nextcloud, my cloud from Nextcloud does too. So I'm able to sync my KeePass file to my iPhone using this methodology as well. It's worked really quite well, I got to say. And I did the same thing as you. I exported from 1Password, I imported into KeePass XC, and all my codes, all my two-factor, all my passkeys came over. And now, as I say, it doesn't look as pretty as 1Password does, but all the functionality is there. And yeah, you've got a little bit more management to do because you've got to maintain the database file yourself. But it's entirely free, open source, validated, blah, blah, blah.
But it doesn't need to look pretty, does it? All you're going in there for is... have you seen the Passwords app, by the way? It's not a very good app. It's a very basic app. But all you're going in there for is add a password, give me a password, done. That's all you want from it, isn't it? It's not like you're in it, creating content all the time. You're not. You're just nipping in and out. And you kind of just want it to be a nothing app, don't you? You want it just to get out of the way as quickly as possible.
But my point was that you can get into this for nothing. You can have a secure password manager for nothing. And if you look at keep in mind, Keepassium is just an password protected way of accessing your fundamentally open source database file with the appropriate encryption on. You don't have to pay anything for the iOS app. There are others out there as well, but you get all the things you actually want to do. So, for example, I have a copy of my driving license on here because I've gone on holiday and forgotten my driving license before now, so I think it's quite handy to have an image of that. So that is in part of my secure locker as well. And even the free version of this supports file attachments for accessing it on your iPhone. So if you're not using any password app at all, I think this is a decent place to start. And you don't need to get as sophisticated as I've done by running it on my own cloud. If you drag this into iCloud or you drag this into Google Drive or Dropbox or any of those services and have a high enough encrypted password on there, this is actually quite a nice place to start, I think.
Yeah, I can see the appeal of it, if I'm honest. Like, it's a good way to get your foot in the door. It's a low barrier to entry, like you say, there's no cost, and it's a way of you owning it. Feels like something I should play with.
I think you should check it out. The thought for me is how am I going to synchronize this between all my devices, because I didn't want to put it in iCloud. But I think for you and your family, and it does support shared keys amongst other members. It does support a lot of things. It ain't pretty, but it works really well, and it's updated. So I think it's worth checking out.
Yeah, well, like I say, it doesn't need to be pretty there, does it? Because it's a password manager.
Yeah, exactly. And as long as it integrates with what you need it to do, then that's fine. So that's one thing. And then the other thing I want to talk about in terms of passwords is a thing called Bitwarden. So this is, I think the fundamentals of it are open source, but there is a company built on top of it that will do the hosting for you as well. So Bitwarden itself is a enterprise or business level password manager in the same way that 1Password is, or LastPass, or any of these other ones, with a sort of ongoing monthly fee. But as I say, the fundamentals of it are open source. I'll come back to that in a minute. For a personal user, you can download and make use of Bitwarden for absolutely free. Enterprise, personal users, whatever. There is a free tier to this for you as a personal user. So I think that's quite interesting, really. That again, you can get up and running with a password app that integrates really well with your browser. It looks quite nice, I got to say, Bitwarden. The way that it's managed, and you host your keys and all the rest of it on here. For the princely sum of free, I think it's good, and it's cross-platform. So it's probably worth checking that out if you're interested too.
Princely sum of free is always good, isn't it?
It is. But look at the price for even premium members. So it's only $10 per year for them to host your password manager, right?
Yeah, that's pretty good, isn't it? That's a no-brainer.
Yeah, 6 users, $40 billed annually for a family account. That's considerably cheaper than 1Password.
Yeah, that's good, isn't it? That is really good.
Right. So I think you could dip your toe if you want. If you don't trust yourself to host the password file, you could dip your toe into something like Bitwarden for free, see what it's like, and then upgrade at a later date. And I was really impressed with the service. I've got to say, I didn't import all my passwords into it. I imported some just to check it out. And the browser integration, and I think in many ways it was actually slicker than 1Password.
That's quite interesting, isn't it?
It's worth looking for. And then, last but not least, because I've always got to go the extra mile, I did say Bitwarden was open source, so that means somebody has forked a thing called Vaultwarden off of it, and you can actually run a Bitwarden server yourself on your own estate. And I did this too because I'm mad for it. And this will give you the same sort of functionality as the absolute top tier Bitwarden. So instead of going off and paying for an enterprise account for X per month, you can host this yourself. It's got a front end, back end web client thing, browser extensions, all the rest of it, and looks really nice. So it's a bit harder to host than the KeePass thing because conceptually you have to run a server to do this, whereas KeePass you're just synchronizing a file. So you've got that sort. So it's not hard, but you've still got to do it. And then all the security is on you to make sure your server's kept updated and all that kind of stuff, obviously. But actually, it works really, really well. I was very, very impressed with it. So I've gone out and I've properly done my homework. I've checked out all the password services this week, and I think KeePass and Bitwarden are definitely worth checking out.
Your commitment to the cause is impressive.
Thank you. I do try.
Yeah. Whereas I had a little flirt with Apple passwords for half an hour.
And you couldn't answer my question about the two-factor authenticator.
Not on Windows and on Mac. Yeah, I mean, it does do all the MFA codes and everything. And it is better than obviously what it used to be in the settings app, but it still feels like an Apple of half-baked, which is a little frustrating because everybody should have a password manager. And this is a great way of people like my wife, my children, having a passwords manager. Just by default, and it's annoying that Apple's one is a bit lackluster.
More than that, you shouldn't be locked into it, and all of them let you export the files. They do. You can export your password files as what seems to be a fairly standard, industry standard interchange format. It's a CSV with a bunch of stuff in it, basically, and that's good. But if your kids are on Windows or do decide they're going to run Linux Mint for the next gaming PC, they shouldn't be restricted to not being able to do that because you've got an Apple password manager.
Yeah, I'd agree with
that. And not a large American company.
I would also agree with that.
Shall we do App of the Week?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I've talked about this before when we did our Linux special. My App of the Week is Debian Linux. I've been getting back into Linux in quite a hefty way. Hopefully news on that in the show in a few weeks' time. So I've been checking out Debian. There are, as I said in the Linux episode then, there are sort of three main flavors of Linux to consider. There is Debian, which is the ground truth for things like Ubuntu and Linux Mint and a whole bunch of other distributions. There is Fedora, which is a spin-off of the Red Hat project, and then there is Arch Linux, which is madness, and unless you know what you're doing, don't go anywhere near it. Debian is a great, solid, reliable place to start. Lots of internet servers run on Debian. It's more up to date than it used to be. It was always criticized for being a bit slow with packages and updates and all the rest of it. If you download the right weekly version of it, you'll get a more up to date kernel. You'll be ready to go. So I've been running it on what was my gaming PC. Windows has gone from it forever again. Now I'm doing stuff with it. I've been just really impressed with the rock solid stability of Debian Linux. It's worked really, really well. And I think if you're interested in Linux, it's worth checking it out.
I just love how you find the time. That's what I'm going to say. I think, to play with all these things, you're doing a good service for the greater good.
The greater good. Thing of the week.
Mine's quite simple this week. I've actually gone for Apple trading. I've got some old iPads lying around, and I was like, I wonder if I can trade these in with Apple. And I could. And you just go in there, you put the serial number in. What is annoying is when you have a grey iPad with a serial number written in a slightly darker grey on the back of it and you can barely read it. But I've actually sent some equipment back to Apple. It's a third party. They send you a box, you chuck it in there, you take it around the post office, they take it back. And hopefully we have some Apple credit, which probably goes to our early bit of the call. If I leave that in my Apple account for when I buy an iPhone, it should take the price of my iPhone down quite nicely for me. So I was just going to recommend that if people have got any old Apple equipment and you can't be bothered to sell it at CX or put it on eBay, but you just want somebody to take it away from you, might get 50 quid. It's worth it.
Yeah, I've done it once. I did it with the phone previous to this one because nobody in my family wants the big Pro Max phones. It's probably worth me trading them at that point. I don't feel you get as much as you would from an eBay or one of these other companies.
You don't, but you're the money you don't get, you haven't got any hassle, and you've got a guaranteed sale, haven't you? So if you want to get more money for it, sell on eBay, but you've got to sort it out. Whereas I quite like the idea of just post it, ship it off. It made me do it. Otherwise, they'd probably still be sat on the side. So you're not getting top dollar for it, but equally, you haven't got any hassle. So I would definitely recommend.
You don't get much for an iPad Mini, do you?
No. Well, that's probably,
Also,
that's
Macs
probably a
for
new
some reason-
iPad Mini.
Yeah, Macs for some reason have extra credit. That's interesting, isn't it?
I think that it's like a tenner, and they've done that because the M4 MacBook Air is out.
Fair enough. I think we can call that a show, Chris.
I think so. Cheers, Rod. That was really good. And if anyone wants to get in contact, Rod is at G5Maniac at Marston.Scott. He's also on Blue Sky, and he's at G5Maniac at bsky.social. I'm on Mastodon, and I'm at _CJP at Mastodon.social. You can watch on YouTube by going to the website and clicking on the YouTube link, or you can drop us an email at waitfromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.